nobody is clapping. And yet, within a decade, that same boy will stand on the biggest stage the sport has ever built, and the whole planet will know his name. This is not a fairy tale written after the fact. It is the story of how fear simply never got the chance to take root in one particular childhood, and what happens when a boy who never learned to be afraid finally gets the ball at his feet in front of the world. This story offers almost none of that. It offers a single mother working shifts before sunrise, a father scraping together rent money some months and falling short in others, and a neighborhood most of the country preferred to look away from. And somehow, out of exactly that soil, grew one of the calmest footballers most of us will ever watch play. His father, Monir Nasraoui, had arrived from Morocco. His mother, Sheila Abana, had come from Equatorial Guinea. She was 16 years old when she gave birth to him, two teenagers, from two different continents, trying to build something stable in a country that was not always easy on newcomers. Before we go further, there is a story behind the name itself, and it deserves to be told properly, because almost nobody outside Catalonia knows it, and even fewer outside Spain have ever heard the full version rather than the shortened one repeated in headlines. In the months around his birth, the young family fell behind on rent. Not for the first time, and not for the last, two men from their community, ordinary working men with no wealth to speak of, stepped in and helped cover what was owed, so that the family would not be put out on the street with a newborn baby. Their names were Lamine and Yamal. He thought of the two men who had shown him kindness when kindness was hard to come by. No idea what they were actually singing about. There is a second story tied to his infancy that the world only discovered much later. In 2007, a Barcelona newspaper and UNICEF organized a small charity raffle in the family's town. The Nasraoui household won it, and the prize was a photo session inside the Camp Nou dressing room with the club's players. A 20-year-old midfielder crouched down for the picture, cradling a 6-month-old baby inside a small plastic bath, unsure how to hold him. That midfielder was Lionel Messi. Nobody in the room understood what they were looking at. It was simply a nice photograph for a charity calendar, filed away and forgotten. It was only after the summer of 2024, once his son had become a name of his own, that he finally posted it, with a caption that read, in translation, that same photograph would take on a meaning nobody in that dressing room could have imagined. Lamine Yamal's parents separated when he was 3. His mother moved to a town called Granollers, where she worked shifts that began before sunrise just to keep things afloat. His father stayed behind in a neighborhood called Rocafonda, in the coastal city of Mataró, about 30 kilometers up the coast from Barcelona. That left the deepest mark on him. Studies have suggested that roughly half the neighborhood lives below the poverty line. It is not a postcard version of Spain. It is a place where eviction notices are common enough that nobody looks twice when a family carries their furniture out onto the pavement. For years, Rocafonda carried a reputation in the Catalan press that had little to do with the people who actually lived there, a shorthand for crime and neglect rather than a neighborhood of families getting up early, working long hours, and raising children the best way they knew how, that any policy initiative had managed in years. That kind of quiet, relentless endurance ran through the family long before Lamine was born, and in many ways, it is the real foundation beneath everything that followed. He would later say, in an interview, that his childhood was not the easiest one, but that his mother had shown him only the beautiful parts of it, and his father's own admission that there were stretches when he had to go out looking for whatever work or spare items the street could offer just to bring food home. And losing the ball meant standing on the sidelines with nothing to do. At 4 years old, he joined a local club called La Torrida, near his mother's home in Granollers. He was not chasing a dream of the Camp Nou yet. He was simply doing the one thing that made an otherwise difficult childhood feel light. Its famous youth academy, that had already produced Xavi Hernandez, Andres Iniesta, and Messi himself. One of those coaches would later recall that the boy did things nobody had taught him, movements that seemed to come from instinct rather than instruction. What those coaches were watching, without quite having the language for it yet, was the emergence of what modern football calls an inverted winger. It is a modern, almost mathematical way of playing, dependent on split-second decisions about space and timing. And yet everyone who watched him as a child kept describing the same thing, not a tactical system, but a kind of joy. 7 years later, on the night of the 29th of April, 2023, Camp Nou was packed for a league match against Real Betis. He was 15 years, 9 months, and 16 days old, and within moments he would become the youngest player to wear the Barcelona first-team shirt in over a century. After the final whistle, head coach Xavi Hernandez, himself a Barcelona legend, shook his head in something close to disbelief. He told reporters that he had simply instructed the boy to go out and try things, and that the boy had done exactly that, without a trace of fear. That fearlessness mattered more than most people realized, because of the shadow he was stepping into. Barcelona had spent 2 years in a kind of mourning since Messi's departure in 2021. The trophies had slowed. The identity of the club felt unmoored. And so, as it happens with almost every gifted teenager who wears that shirt, journalists began asking Lamine the same question again and again. Are you the next Messi? He answered it the way he answered most things, with an easy smile and very few words, saying simply that he did not compare himself to anyone, that he only thought about playing the game in front of him. Barcelona, it turned out, had not unearthed a substitute for what they had lost. They had found something structurally different. A boy who had grown up with so little room for fear that the concept barely registered with him at all. Within a year of that debut, he was setting records nobody his age was supposed to touch. That same spring, only weeks after his first appearance for the senior side, he became the youngest goal scorer in the history of La Liga, Spain's top division, a competition that had existed for nearly a century before he was born. The speed at which records fell around him unsettled people who had seen a great deal of talent pass through those training pitches before. Spain's senior national team wanted him, not the under-17s, not the under-19s, the full senior squad, while he was still only 16 years old. His debut came off the bench against Georgia. Spain were already comfortably ahead when, in the 74th minute, a cross arrived from the left. He cut inside onto his stronger left foot, opened his body, and curled a shot that seemed to bend around the physics of the moment itself. On the 14th of July, he walked onto the pitch of Berlin's Olympic Stadium for the final against England. 17 years and 1 day old, the youngest player ever to appear in a European Championship final, and by most historical counts, the youngest to ever play in a major international final of any kind. Then, in the 86th minute, Mikel Oyarzabal scored the winner. Spain were champions of Europe, and Lamine, still not 18, was named Young Player of the tournament. What happened next, in the middle of the celebration, is the detail that turned him from a talented teenager into something closer to a folk hero back home. The final digits of Rocafonda's postal code, 08304. It was not a gesture for the cameras, or at least not primarily, telling it that one of its own had just become champion of an entire continent. He has repeated that gesture after nearly every goal since, at club and country level alike. The years since have moved almost too quickly to summarize. He won the Copa Trophy, awarded to the world's best under-21 player, in both 2024 and 2025, becoming the first player in the award's history to win it twice. At the main Ballon d'Or ceremony in September 2025, held in Paris, he finished runner-up to Ousmane Dembélé, missing out on becoming the youngest winner in the award's history by a matter of votes. His father called the decision an insult in public. Lamine, for his part, simply posted a short message congratulating the winner and thanking his own teammates, and moved on to the next match, sometimes to the visible discomfort of the club around him. Lamine himself has rarely matched that intensity in public. Whatever storm builds around him, in headlines, in transfer speculation, in comparisons to legends twice his age, he tends to meet it with the same expression he wore in those borrowed boots at 7 years old, mildly amused, entirely unbothered, already thinking about the next ball, and entertainment brands eager to attach themselves to a face that resonated equally with older fans who remembered Messi's debut and a much younger audience discovering the sport through him for the first time. Magazine covers, brand campaigns, and record-breaking shirt sales followed a career that, technically, had barely started. In June 2026, Lamine was named a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, focused on children's right to play, a cause that needs no explanation to anyone who has seen where he came from. He still fasts during Ramadan while playing professional matches, a detail that says something quiet about how little he has adjusted himself to fit anyone else's comfort. He still returns to Rocafonda when his schedule allows, still walks into a small bar called El Cordobés, where a signed shirt of his hangs on the wall, still hugs the grandmother who once raised 7 children largely alone. On a wall in the neighborhood, someone has painted a message that has nothing to do with football scores. It reads, in Rocafonda, more Lamine Yamals and fewer evictions. In other words, more children given the room to become something, and fewer families forced out onto the street the way his own family nearly was. His first major tournament at full senior fitness after months of carrying an injury into the year. He has scored, set up goals, and been named man of the match in a tense, physical encounter against Austria in the round of 32, all while Spain marched through the knockout rounds unbeaten, brushing aside France in the semi-final to book their place in the final. And now, on this very day, the boy from that photograph in the Camp Nou dressing room stands on the edge of the largest stage football has ever built, in a stadium in New Jersey, in a World Cup final against Argentina. Across the pitch from him, wearing the number 10 shirt of the country he once idolized as a child, is the very same man who once knelt awkwardly on the floor of a locker room, unsure how to hold a 6-month-old baby in a plastic bath. One of them is closing out perhaps the final act of the greatest individual career the sport has produced. A man who left his own hometown in Argentina as a child to chase a dream that nearly collapsed under medical bills before it ever began. The other is only 19 years into his life and has already rewritten record books that stood since before either of their fathers were born. A boy who grew up dodging eviction notices and playing on cracked concrete between parked cars has become one of the 2 players the entire footballing world is watching today. On the same afternoon his childhood photograph finally closes its own circle. There is one thread that runs through every chapter of this story, and it has nothing to do with talent alone. Lamine Yamal was never afraid, not because he was born braver than anyone else, but because he grew up in a place where fear was simply a luxury nobody could afford. When you have almost nothing to lose, every chance in front of you starts to look like a gift rather than a threat. Most of us grow up being taught to protect what we have, to weigh consequences carefully, to hesitate before stepping into anything uncertain. Lamine's childhood simply never gave him the raw material to build that instinct in the first place. And what looks from the outside like extraordinary composure under pressure may, at its root. Lamine walked into Camp Nou, into a European final, and onto a World Cup pitch carrying the exact same smile he wore as a child dribbling past boys twice his size on a broken. Carry your own version of Rocafonda with you, whatever shape it takes in your life. The streets, the people, the hard mornings that taught you something a comfortable childhood never could. Hold on to that, and very few stages will ever feel too big again. If one part of it stayed with you more than the rest, the photograph, the borrowed boots, or the 3 fingers raised toward a forgotten postal code, let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. Until next time, take care of yourself, and we will see you again soon.